This thing has caused me a lot of grief and a lot of stress. It's even made the hair out of my head fall out. You can't tell because I keep cutting it so short. So for the past couple of days, I have been using the DJI Ronin RS3 Pro gimbal, and in typical fashion of me, I start out as a beginner with some crazy pro level equipment. And this is no exception. This is my first gimbal that I've ever used, and I really got excited to give it a shot and actually learn how to use this thing and make my shots better. I very quickly realized, which I'm going to talk about in the next video, just using a gimbal doesn't just make you better. You'll actually get worse before you get better. But that's a topic we'll talk about in the next video. I wanted to share with you 3 major settings and 2 other minor personal preference settings that have really changed the way I capture video with this gimbal. Now, specifically, I'm doing automotive videography, but I think this applies to anything. Specifically, one of the shots that always fascinates me is that orbital shot. That shot where you're like drifting around something and everything around, like the foreground and the background, is all giving this perspective that like there's a lot of movement. I'm so excited it's giving me gas. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to do that. Suddenly, 1 or 2 setting changes just changed the game for me. Now, one of the things that I did do is, even though some of the settings and some of the parameters on this thing are a little bit intimidating because there's a lot of physics involved and there's a lot of just all this stuff that's like pro level, I decided not to let that stop me, and I dug into the settings and particularly the app. The DJI app is very good. It has a lot of customizable areas that will definitely serve the frustrations that you have if you just take the time to actually go into them. And that's why I figured I would talk about the 3 main things that I did that covered a vast majority of the shots that I was looking to get. And that's a very important point. What I'm about to mention is very specific to the things that I have been trying to get. And I'll mention those specific shots that have been made infinitely easier and smoother because of these setting changes. These setting changes might make other things that you're trying to get, depending on the context, more difficult. However, if at least you can relate to some of the stuff that I'm about to tell you, it will give you an understanding of these settings, and you might be able to apply them in the opposite direction as well. So the 3 main settings that I'm going to talk about are your joystick setting, your deadband setting, and your motor follow speed setting. Now, right off the bat, I'll tell you the settings that I'm using right now are a joystick setting of custom at about 18, a deadband of low, and a follow speed of custom at a setting of about 10. Let's get into why I picked those settings and how they benefited me. And we're going to do that right now behind me here at a different focal length. All right, now that we're balanced, I am going to, like I said, explain and walk through how these particular settings have benefited me in which scenarios. And then that way, if you need the thing to do something else, or you need to set it in the opposite direction, maybe the context will give you some insight to understand what these things are doing. So let's talk about the first one, is deadband. Deadband is similar to sort of steering dead zone, right? It's the amount of input you put where like nothing happens, or like in video games, like the joystick dead zone, where like nothing happens when you move it. That's sort of deadband, and I'll give you an example. Now, if you're on the DJI app, you're going to open it up and go into user profile, and then right there is going to be deadband. It's going to be follow speed, deadband, and push mode. So for the sake of demonstration, we're going to set that to high and watch what happens. So what the deadband is doing is it's deciding, because I set it to all the way the highest, it's allowing me to move before it decides, oh, I need to move with them. Now I'm going to set the deadband to low, and we'll see what that does. Not only does it stay with me, but as soon as I stop, it goes to complete neutral. The next one I'm going to talk about is joystick speed. So the joystick speed is literally as it's described, right? It's how quickly the camera moves according to you cranking on the joystick. But there's actually 2 settings to the joystick that I had adjusted. One is the speed, but one is also the smoothness. Now, if you go into, on the DJI app, and you go into user profile, At the bottom there, you'll see controls. If you tap on control and then you go over to motion up top, what you'll notice is pan, tilt, and roll, and you'll see deadband, max speed, and smoothness. What you're gonna do here, deadband you see is at low, max speed is the speed of the joystick that I have set to 18, and the smoothness I have set to 25. The smoothness, that determines how abruptly the joystick starts and stops moving the camera. So if you set smoothness down to low, or in this case I set it custom, if you go custom 0, let's see what happens with that. Now in this case, I'm gonna change the joystick sensitivities on the gimbal itself, because while there isn't a global setting it on the phone, you have to check for pan, tilt, and roll. Whereas if you change the settings on the gimbal itself, it'll change the sensitivity of the joystick for pan, tilt, and roll all in one shot. Joystick speed fast, joystick smoothness 0. And I'm gonna go left, right, up, and down. Now you notice I'm pulling up and letting go, and pushing down and letting go. Now we're gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna change only the smoothness. And the smoothness, we're gonna crank all the way up to 30. Now, up, let go. You see that? And start going down now, and letting go now. Do you see? And starting to go left now, and letting go. Now we'll try one more time doing the same thing, and we'll put the joystick smoothness back down to 0, pushing right now, and letting go. That's joystick smoothness. Now follow speed is something that was giving me a massive headache because I thought I understood it, and I cranked it up to fast because I want the thing to follow me, because that's what I was thinking the gimbal was doing, that I wanted it to be an extension of my brain, but it's not. It has its own brain, and I need to learn how to work with it. So what I've realized, shout out to Nick Lavion here. Why? Fine. Shout out to Nick Lavion here. And he suggested that I drop the follow speed down to a custom setting, but slow, and it solved everything right away. The look on his face when it clicked was incredible. But that's why I want to talk about it now. So what we're gonna do, we can actually set this on the phone. Now, same thing, user profile. Right when you go to user profile, the top one is follow speed. We'll set that to fast. By making the follow speed fast, what ends up happening is it does it early and it pivots quickly. And actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set it to a custom of 10, which is what I set it on. If you notice, what's happening is as I'm moving, there's a slight delay in the camera movement, and that's the point of the gimbal, is to remove your jerky movements, and it smooths it out. So that's it. Those are the 3 main functionalities that I've changed that have given me like that 80-20 rule. They've dramatically improved my ability to film the way I've been trying to film. Now again, a slow follow speed is not something you'll necessarily want if you're doing fast action stuff. But the point is, you see how it's affecting the movement of the camera. So if you need it to move differently, you can now understand how to adjust those parameters. And there are other parameters to change, but these are the ones that have been serving me. Speaking of other parameters, there are 2 other parameters that are my personal preference that have changed, and I'll show you those here. One is, if you can relate in any video game that uses a joystick, if you use inverted y-axis, you're gonna wanna know how to do this. If you go into user profile, go to control at the bottom, and you look at channel 1. If you look in control and you look at channel 1, 2, and 3, on the right-hand side, there's a box in each one, right? And they all say nor for normal. If you tap any one of those, it turns to rev or reverse. Channel 1 is your tilt axis, which it says on the right there. It's your y-axis. If you click reverse, now you got inverted y-axis. If you want to invert channel 3, which is your pan, because some people want to do that, you just click reverse. I wouldn't invert channel 2 for roll, but I don't really use roll anyway. But now you know how to do it. So that's one thing. The other thing I change, if you go back into user profile before the control screen, at the bottom you have push mode. And I have mine set to push, pan, and tilt. Now what push mode does is normally the gimbal is set, the motors do their thing. If you try to push against them, it won't let you do it. So I'm pushing roll and it's like, no, I don't wanna go, I don't wanna go. But if I push pan or if I push tilt, it allows me to adjust it. Gently nudge it and it'll go where you want it to go and it'll stay there. And then you can move it around from that position. For one, it feels like an added safety measure for me in case it gets pushed, but also because I'm using the joystick at a slow speed, let me set it to my actual speed. So I've got my smoothness set to 25 and my joystick speed set to 18. This is me moving it with the joystick. Now, if I want to move the camera at a certain tilt angle or a certain pan angle using the joystick, it's going to take a while. So since I'm using lower speeds, I can put it to where I want it to go and then go from there. So that's it. Those are the 3 major settings and the 2 other personal preference settings that I've used to change or to start off progress in my gimbal journey. I hope it helped you. Let me know what settings you choose to adjust and customize in your gimbal. And let me know if these help you, if this has given you some insight and changed the way you film as well. Leave it in the comments below and let me know what you think. Thank you for being here, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Or you'll see me.